Hello, everyone. We are going to get started. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Cori Wong. I am Assistant Vice President of Gender Equity in the Office of the Vice President for Diversity, and I also serve as the Director of the Women and Gender Collaborative. You are attending the Women's Leadership Series, which is a follow-up to a program that really got instituted last spring in the little series. So if you're unfamiliar with it, the goal of this program is to create space for discussions and conversations to, one, share information that is kind of fundamental information that could help people across the institution and be able to navigate the systems better. So in that sense, it's like we wanted to bring opportunities for information sharing and leadership development to as many people as possible, make it accessible so you don't have to be admitted to a highly selective institute to get that information, but we want it to be readily available so that everybody can do their jobs well and pursue their goals, however that is appropriate for them. So I just want to let you know that these series are also recorded and posted on the Women and Gender Collaborative's website. So if you haven't been able to attend before in the past, or for anybody who isn't here today in the room with us, it will be publicly available on the website so you can watch the videos. So with that, I want to also first and foremost thank the committee for putting this together. We're starting a new program through the Women and Gender Collaborative to get more engagement across campus with the programming that we're doing through the systems-based leadership development through service model. So we have co-chairs who are new to the committee. I really want to thank Alice Workmeister and Wong Howerton for stepping up into those roles and helping to make this particular program possible. I also want to thank our sponsors who have contributed to this as well. And that includes the Office of Equal Opportunity and the Office of the Vice President for Diversity for contributing funds. And then finally, all the LSC staff for working the AV and sound and then getting the room set up and our catering services too. So please, join me in thanking everybody who made this possible. So I want to also first acknowledge that I didn't introduce myself with my pronouns. I use she, her pronouns. And the Women's Leadership Series is a program that, again, has started previously, but even in the name, the title Women's Leadership Series, this is information that hopefully is available and useful for people of all genders. And there is some tension there of acknowledging that a leadership series just for women, it's not just for women. But part of the goal is to highlight some of our leaders on campus and the great things that they're already doing rather than having to bring in external experts. We want to acknowledge that we have people across our campus who are doing great things, who are tremendous leaders, really awesome role models, and many of those are women in really awesome, powerful positions, and then plenty of people are not also identifying as women. So I want to just throw that out there for everybody in the room to be thinking about too, that using gender-inclusive language is something that the Women and Gender Collaborative is really considering. And in this particular case, we have people in the room and on our panel who do not identify as women, and this is still a space that we want to make sure that everybody feels is supportive and welcoming and appreciative for all their contributions. So that's a note for our consideration and just something that I wanted everybody to be aware of as we join here today. And now I am going to stop talking so we can get right to the program and talk about really awesome tips for navigating how to be a professional staff while also pursuing a degree at the same time. This is something that some people might be doing to try to advance their careers. Some people might just do it for their own edification to continue learning. And it's something that ultimately I hope that we can all be having a conversation about collectively on an institutional level of how we can support those kinds of endeavors for our employees so that people have access to those opportunities. So now I will turn it over to Wei.
Thanks to Cori, and thanks for all of you for being here. My name is Wong Howerton, and currently I'm the Executive Director of University Advancement Communications. And so advancement is an entire division, and our focus is fundraising to support the university's mission and all that you all do on a daily basis. The topic today, professional leader student tips for success, and there were other words there, but that's all I could fit on my page. And we have three wonderful panelists who happen to sit in the order that I wrote their names down this morning. I don't know what that's about. So I'm going to do a quick introduction of each one of them. To the far end of the table, Brit Heiring. She is the new communications director for CSU Extension. And I was asking her, haven't you been there for 2 months now? Oh no, 4 weeks. She comes into that position from a similar role at Campus Rec. She recently did a mindfulness and social media topic speech from TEDx CSU, so if you want to check that out, that might be something interesting to all of us. And she was full-time and as an employee at CSU while pursuing her master's in tourism, travel, and services management. So thanks, Brit, for being here. Jimena Sagas is next. She is an assistant professor in social sciences, and she is at the Morgan Library. And she is currently pursuing her PhD in organizational learning, performance, and change. That's a lot, OLPC. Jimena also serves on the Community Human Relations group for the city of Fort Collins, as well as a lot of other groups here, both on our campus community and within our community. Next to her, we have Megan Skeehan, who is currently the programming assistant in accounting in the College of Business. And they are also our representative on the Classified Personnel Council, and also pursuing a bachelor's in ethnic studies and interdisciplinary, C-I-N-T, interdisciplinary liberal arts. So thanks to the three of you. We did provide our panelists a few questions before they got here just to get their juices flowing and get us to where we need to be. And so I think what we'll do is we'll just start. I'll start with the first question, and then any of you can take the mic and answer that question before we move forward. And don't feel pressure to all have to answer all 4 questions. There are 4 questions. So we'll start with the first one. What compelled you to pursue a degree and to advance your education while also working as a professional? Was it part of some greater career development plan, or where did you get your motivation from?
So Meg Skeehan, I use they, them pronouns. So I'm actually doing everything in reverse. I have tons of professional and personal experience working in restaurants and event planning and higher education and doing systems projects, and I don't have a degree right now. I actually just have a high school diploma. So usually when I tell people that, they're like, oh, aren't you working on a graduate? And I'm like, no, it's my bachelor's. And I was ashamed of that for a long time because it's about access. I see a lot of jobs that I actually can't apply for, that I can do that job, but I don't have a piece of paper. So coming to CSU from the private sector, working in restaurant industry, I actually came here with the intention of A, having like a less intense work schedule, and then B, to actually use the employee study privilege at CSU. When I first went to college when I was 18, I was a first-generation student, and at the time in Greeley at UNC, they didn't really have any programs for first-gen students, and so I didn't have the skills, support, or social navigational power to be successful. So, you know, now that I'm kind of been working, doing all this professional work for 6 years at CSU, and then taking classes for 5.5 years, and I still have, like, I think, maybe 7 more years if I keep doing it at this rate until I finish my bachelor's. I really just see that it's important that I do finish this, and not just for myself, but to show other state classified employees and other professionals that you can do this. So.
Okay, Jimena, and she, her, hers. And before I begin, I just want to say thank you. I feel so honored to be on this panel to share my insights and experience. Sometimes it's difficult to actually remember that embarking on this journey is a challenge, and I'm happy to share these insights and experiences. The reason why I started this degree was, first, I didn't feel I had a choice. I'm a single mother of a growing 14-year-old rebellious boy. And I need to bring us forward in life, and I just thought that if I didn't do this, then how can I make the income I need to give us opportunities? Second, I also felt like a lot of opportunity, I had to show that I was serious about my profession. As a woman of color, I was not always seen as a leader, a potential leader. And so I kind of felt like I needed to have double the degrees or double the effort so that I can be seen. And so that was the two of the reasons why I felt that this was not really a choice. It was more about surviving. The second reason is because I wanted to make an impact and I wanted to have a voice. And so the mental models and the worldview that I get from courses and just breaking down my assumptions and asking the right questions has really helped me make more impact in the work that I do on a daily basis, from keeping my household together all the way to building strategies or building strategic plans in the work that I do. And so those are kind of the reasons why.
I wish I could say that there was some destined sort of reason that I started my studies as well, but I feel a lot of solidarity because I have similar reasons. So I'm Brit, she, her pronouns, and I just completed my master's degree this past December. It took me 4 years, and when I started my degree, I actually was I had just gone through a pretty painful divorce. And I was with this person for 10 years of my life, from 18 on, and so I was having a lot of identity crisis in that moment of who am I outside of this person, and I decided that I needed to find something for self-improvement that had nothing to do with or had no ties to the current living situation that I was getting out of, and so I found going to school as kind of the motivation to just have something to work on and better myself. But the shame that Meg shared in their experience, it very much resonates with me. Being first gen, getting my undergraduate degree was this massive accomplishment that I felt, and I kind of thought, okay, I did it, like, check, we're done here, no more school. And then when I started working in higher ed, I felt very much surrounded by, and it's not necessarily the case, but in my perception, I just felt like everyone around me had advanced degrees. And I just started to feel almost embarrassed about that, especially in my department at the time. Pretty much it's a requirement of every single assistant director and coordinator position. And I was at a position technically, higher in the hierarchy, and I didn't have a degree. And so there was a lot of all of that kind of added to it. And over time, being in school, and with some of the questions later, we'll talk about this more, but I did find a new direction. There was a really amazing colleague of mine that shared, because I wanted to give up 10,000 times. It's not easy. And a colleague shared, a fellow woman of color who identifies as a Latinx, shared that it's less than 3% of women at the time that identify as Latina or Latinx had advanced degrees. And so that kind of helped fuel the rest of my journey after, the first 2 years of riding on the self-betterment after divorce and look at me, I'm doing it. After that, it kind of nosedived, and then that motivation of just feeling like I was working towards something greater than myself is what kept me in it towards finishing. But there was a lot to it. Shame, wanting to just improve, all of that kind of combined.
Thanks for sharing. I should say my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I started my master's degree and just finished 2 Decembers ago, and it took me 5 years. I took a class every semester while I was working full-time too. And I think for me, it was very similar. It wasn't this drive to, well, maybe it was. I've always wanted an advanced degree since I was this big. I don't know why. My dad has one. But I felt like to have a voice, to be able to compete or be in the same space as folks in higher ed. There's a lot of pressure on folks to do those things. Can I ask the audience, has anybody taken coursework while you've been working full-time? Amazing. Is anybody contemplating it and that's why you're here? Just do it. Just do it. Second question, thank you for sharing that. What conversations did you have with your supervisors, either before you embarked on this, during, what kind of things did you have to deal with during and after that might be helpful for us that are venturing into the space again?
I'll answer that, but this is my, let's say, my rebellious side coming out. I didn't have a conversation. I just told my employer what I was doing. I said, I'm doing this. I had that conversation more with myself and my family. And then my employer was, whether they would support me or not, honestly, I was going to do it. And so I went in and said, I'm doing this, and I was ready to respond whether it was a supportive reaction or not supportive reaction. Luckily, the leadership in my area was supportive.
I'm sure you were nervous, though, but steadfast in the fact that you were going to do it.
Yes.
I had a brief conversation with my supervisor at the time to sort of same vein of just heads up, I'm going to be starting this. And again, because it took me 4 years, a lot had evolved in my department. But in the beginning, they were very supportive, but I did have the feeling of, okay, this is great, and how is this not going to affect your job? Was kind of the conversation that I had. And over time, the department kind of shifted, and some of the other colleagues that I had were getting PhDs towards the end, and there was really this environment shift of how can we support you in doing this? How can we maintain work-life balance? But I did feel in the beginning the conversation was around me explaining how it would not affect my day-to-day job and responsibilities.
So I actually am on my third job at CSU in a little over 6 years of employment. So it's kind of been a different conversation with every supervisor. But every job I've had on campus is a service-based position, so I actually have to be somewhere to do my job. And that's even trickier balancing my role on Classified Personnel Council as well. But I'd either have to be in the dining hall during meal hours, or at a desk when the department is open, or be at the beck and call of my faculty who apparently don't know how to put paper in a Xerox machine. Yes, not everyone's like that. That's a little bit of a job. So I've had to be artful in figuring out how to take classes. So I have to take a lot of online classes, but now I'm actually getting to a point where I can't. And in ethnic studies, it's really, and I work in the College of Business, so it's really hard. They're like, well, how's ethnic studies going to help us? And I'm like, how is it not going to help you? Let me tell you all about, racial discrimination and how we should be really unpacking this and how the students of color in our college need this. But yeah, I always have to have this conversation of like, well, how will this benefit us? And I don't think it's as clear. And then the other conversation is often, well, are you going to leave us when you get your degree? To which I say, well, it's going to be a while, so don't have to worry about that right now. But in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, I am.
Peace.
Yes, peace out. Yeah, so I have to have my supervisor sign the form, and I have a really great supervisor right now, and so she's always just like, do you feel like you have time for this? Like, when are you gonna sleep? And I'm just like, it's fine, and eventually, yeah, so you just have to kind of see, what can I do? How am I gonna approach this degree? At what point can I not take online classes anymore? But what's really cool is there's actually a push towards developing more online courses. And I've even gone to my department and been like, it'd be really cool is if you had if you did a night class every once in a while. Because in ethnic studies, it's difficult. It's a very small department, so it's like a big ask, but I try, so.
Thanks. Third question is, what support did you need while pursuing your degrees? I think you all have explained that you had varying levels of quote-unquote support in the workplace. You had probably partners and friends and family that were sometimes wondering when you would sleep, sometimes wondering why are you doing this, because you're just bringing this upon yourself. And then lots of questions probably in the workplace of, is this going to take away from your work? Or is this going to distract you or take away from your time? So what can you tell us about the support you did or did not receive, or could have really utilized if you had received it?
So the support that I received in the beginning looked very different than at the end. There's a theme here. And so in the beginning, I almost used it as a badge of honor, which, I look back, there was a lot of unpacking I still needed to do around this, but I can do it all. Like this idea of like, look, I'm going to work full time and I'm going to kill it at my job, and I'm going to go to school at night and online, and I'm going to do all these things, and I don't need help from anybody. And I kind of wore that on my own, and that did not last very long. It's not easy going to school and working full time. There are a lot of late nights and weekend time that, for my support system at the time, my friends and family, I had to be clear after the fact. I kind of learned the hard way about boundaries of, I love you and I want to spend time with you, but I'm in school, and that means that I can't go to these social engagements, or I can't attend this weekend getaway, or I am so sorry, but I'll come to your wedding, but I can't come to your bachelor party or bachelorette party and your shower. And all, there was just these conversations. And at first, a lot of people in my life, that was a big adjustment, because that's just the kind of person I am, is I like to be there and show up. I'm very extroverted, so I get energy from folks. So it was a big shift for me to kind of have to turn internal. And there were some friends that I have to say are not friends anymore who were not very understanding and supportive of that. And for me, again, there was a lot going on in my life at that time. That was hard lessons to learn. But then I actually met my partner while I was in school. And so just the support, because I had kind of learned things the hard way in the beginning, and we started seeing each other after I had learned those lessons, I was able from the very beginning to be really clear of like, I am invested in this relationship, I want to give you time, but I'm in school, and there's just so little of me right now that I can give out to the world. And so that was a hard conversation to have in a new relationship. That was scary, but I'm so glad that we did that and we started kind of on the same foot, because it just made my life, it made the guilt is my like emotional thing of choice. That's something I was raised, and guilt is really a big deal to me. And so for me, having to not worry about guilt in that relationship was really important. And then in work, just being more open with folks, especially after the first full year of being in school. Once I started to kind of learn those lessons the hard way, I was a lot more open at work. That, while I'm trying to not let this affect my job, I have to be realistic that this is affecting my job. And there are going to be nights and weekends where, at the time I had a big student staff, like, I'm not going to be able to support you because I'm doing it at the sacrifice of getting a paper in on time or collaborating on a group project. And so I had to be more open and upfront with the boundaries and what I needed from folks. And when I started to do that, I felt that support in a much more real way than I did in the beginning. And it's like I said, to wrap that whole thing up, is I take blame in that too, because I was very wanting to be the person that could do it all and do it all on my own, and that fell apart. And so it was kind of both sides of the situation, of me not being clear about how hard this is going to be and what support I'll need, and folks maybe not really understanding that because of where my life was before. So.
Thanks.
Okay. So one of the big questions I got as people were trying to be supportive and understand why a PhD, people tend to understand master's level because it's a professional degree, you can apply it. But then at the PhD level, they started to question my judgment and say, why are you doing this? And a huge question was also, are you going to make more money because of this? They thought, well, maybe she's doing it for the money, and that would justify why she's doing this. And the answer to my family and my friends was, yeah, money may be a result, but mostly I'm doing it to, can we do things just because it is going to make us, enlighten us? Isn't that good enough? And because sometimes when that's your reason and for doing something, it seems like is it worth it? You start to ask. But I think that that's probably the number one reason that should be behind everything we do for enlightenment, in my personal experience. That was kind of, I received support by people trying to understand why I was doing this. And lack of support was kind of a little bit of reflective in the question, like, is this for more money? Then the other reason is, the other support that I needed was a lot of compassion from a lot of people, from my friends, family, and coworkers. I agree that I thought I was going to be able to do everything, but then I realized that I couldn't. And a lot of my colleagues ended up having to, if I was working on a project, I only worked on 30% or 20% of that work. But the way that I see this eventually, and the kind of support I got from my particular unit, And I think it's because we have this idea is that it takes a village to raise a progressive society. And so it's for you today, but tomorrow when I'm done, then you're going to want to pursue something else, and I'm going to be there for you. And so now that I'm a lot more available, having finished coursework, I feel like I'm stepping up more, and in a more meaningful way too. First, because I felt the support. Second, because I have new ways of thinking about things. And third, I have a lot more time, and I'm more invested in the progress of our group as a whole. And I think that's what is a progressive society about.
Great, thank you. Do you want to answer this question, Mike?
I'll be brief. It's hard working 40 hours a week, and then I have another 20 hours of service commitment on top of all of that as chair of CPC. And then on top of that, I'm usually spending somewhere between 10 to 20 hours on coursework every week. So sometimes and then I also try to have a social life. And I play D&D on Tuesdays. But that's important, right? You have to play, and I think we forget that. And there are times where, like just recently, a lot of people are like, I haven't seen you, and I'm like, yes, I know. And once I come out of this hole, it'll be so much better. But I'm so grateful, and I hate to call you out, Rach, but my ex is actually in the room, and Rachel was so instrumental in encouraging me to enroll in classes, and I was like, I would like say awful things, and she was just like, you can do this, and I believe in you. And she would read my papers, and she would give me really great feedback. And like, she's still someone that I know I could be like, hey, I'm applying for a scholarship, will you read this? And she will, and that matters, and it was like on Sundays when I was just like, this is my day where this is all I can do is schoolwork. Like, she really tried to create that space in which I could just do that. And we had a young son. My stepson at the time would really want me to play with him. And Rachel would be like, right, but Meg really needs to be doing school. And this is the only day that they have to completely dedicate to this. And so that's really important, right? Is really thanking those people who do that for you. And just to also make time to play. But yeah, so, you don't have access to a lot of things that full-time students have access to, so that's something to kind of consider. However, I have some really great workarounds, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody who wants to know what those are, so.
I actually have a little anecdote behind playing. So playing is very important in just your well-being, and you're not a machine. You can't just, I learned quickly, you can't just do this. So I started to be creative about how I played. And so I would go to parties, and then I would say, okay, I'm going to be here for half an hour, then go upstairs, read 10 pages, come back down. And I was serious, and I'd have my book open, and I'd go upstairs, read, and then they're like, what is Jimena doing? She's reading, okay, and then come back down. And so really, it was really cool because number one, you're being an example to the people that you love, and so there are smaller children around, and they can see. And then the other thing, it's just really nice to see that how your friends are going to support this new identity of this weird person that goes upstairs to read. Yeah.
I think based on what you've said, the challenge to us in the room is to not be scared to say you need help. When I was going through my master's, it was all online, so I had a partner who would say, okay, I see that you're a little stressed out, I'll take the boys and we'll leave so that you can work on your paper. But I was able to do that on my own time, as Meg was saying, from 9 o'clock at night to 11 o'clock at night. But you have to be, all of us in this room should be encouraged to be in that vulnerable space to say, okay, I'm stressed because I have these things to do. And to be able to seek that help, even if it's temporary, right? People are all the more willing to share in that burden, especially people who've gone through it. And so reach out to figure out what the workarounds are. Reach out to figure out what those conversation topics should look like when you're approaching a supervisor, or all of a sudden the next degree you're looking at doesn't have online classes. Now what? Transparency, I think, goes a long way to having folks get a sense and a view into what you're doing, as well as to sort of be that person to put it out on the table. So let's see. Finished, Brit, almost finished?
Coursework.
Oh, so now it's dissertation time. Oh my gosh. And Meg, still in it. 7+ more years, come on now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like not even halfway
Yes.
to my bachelor's.
So even in whatever space you find yourself right now, hindsight's 20/20, right? What would you have told yourself, the self that was embarking on this journey? Or even contemplating this, let's not say embarking, the self that was just contemplating like, ooh, can I really do this? Am I doing this for me? What am I trying to prove? What would you say to that self that was still contemplating?
All right, so I was 25 when I decided to start taking classes, and I wish I could go back even further in time to 18-year-old me and say, like, take that year off and go to community college or travel or work, and don't be pressured into going to university, because I just don't think I was emotionally or mentally ready for that when I was 18, and a lot of people aren't. But I think what I would tell 25-year-old me is you're not an imposter, and that you are smart and you are worth it, and you're worth it to yourself. Make a plan. If you're only taking one class a semester, that's okay. There have been like a couple of years where I'm like, wow, I only used 3 of my 9 credits, and I like get really down on it. But the thing is, it's like I'm still like showing up, and then I have to like really put everything into perspective. You know, it's hard to feel like, you know, oh, well, I really should just do this. I'll take a summer class. Well, guess what? A 4-week summer class is like working a second full-time job for 4 weeks. And my summer doesn't really slow down. It actually like stays just as busy, if not busier. You know, and just like, I wish I had told myself, like, reach out for more help and advocate for yourself. And I'm really bad at setting boundaries, and I'm getting better at it as I get older. But yeah, like, I'm worth it. And I am smart enough to do this. And you know, like, not to be intimidated to walk into a classroom full of like 18 and 19-year-olds for some intro level class and be like, wow, this is awkward. But rather like see it as an opportunity of like, actually, did you know that I created study guides? And then all of those like freshmen and sophomores would be like, you did a what? You have an entire semester of a study guide? I'm like, yes, it's called 50 pages of I went to class, and teach them skills. And by teaching them, I was able to like really feel good about myself. And I would also tell myself, like, start applying for those scholarships. Because I've gotten the Joan Gaynor Cooter Scholarship and the Janet and Alan Eddy Scholarship, as well as the CPC Educational Assistance Award. And, you know, like, I was always, like, really hesitant to apply for those, but I got them when I applied. So I wish I had just, like, done it and not doubted myself. So, yeah, really just, like, go back in time and be like, hey, you're awesome. Do it.
I read this on a card, so it's not my words, but I thought it was inspiring. It says, you are more capable than you know. You just have to find out how that is for yourself. So I think that that's what I would tell my younger self is this is part of the journey is discovering this about this power that you have about yourself. The second thing, I'd slow down and really enjoy every part of the process. So even the painful staying up, like enjoy that you're up at 3 a.m, you know, writing. It's amazing.
Yay. Remember that when you're working on your dissertation.
Yeah, I said I would, yes.
What's that smoke coming out of Jimena's house? Oh, it's her enjoying her writing at 3 a.m.
Yeah, it's like, what else would I be doing at 3 a.m? And then establish boundaries for sleep and time with family and friends, sleep and time. One of the major things that happened in my cohort was that we had a colleague pass away unexpectedly in our cohort. We're a cohort of, I believe, 15, I always forget the number, but we're a small cohort, and each year it persisted, and it was always sad to see if one student left or two, second semester, second student left. But when we had a colleague leave because he passed, that was a real shocker for all of us. We had to step back and think, so why are we doing this again? This could happen to any of us, and some of us even considered dropping. And so this is where I started to build compassion and think about education. Academia, oftentimes actually, I hate to say this, or maybe you agree or disagree, but academia actually sees rigor as your as a measure of your competence. So if you can get through this Olympic or this marathon, that means you're worthy of it. And so oftentimes there's not enough compassion in the assignments that are given, and you're expected to think and produce at what I think is an inhumane level sometimes. And I ask why? Why is that? Why do we need to do this? And so I started to have compassion for myself and say, oh, you need that by Monday? I'll give it to you in 2 weeks. And not feel guilty about that, because I realized that that's how I was going to help other people come into degrees and not feel like they had to sacrifice. Why do we need to sacrifice in these ways, by losing sleep, by losing relationships, by losing what we need in order to prove that we are worthy of this degree? I don't think it makes sense. And so establishing these boundaries for myself, not only for myself, my family, but also my professors, because supposedly we're becoming, peers. And then the second thing I tell myself, which I'm starting to do a lot more now, is schedule time to strategize and reflect periodically. So constantly remind myself, why is it that I'm doing this? And then go forward and say, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. And life is constantly changing, and so strategize over and over and over again, maybe on a monthly basis. Take yourself out on retreats and figure out your mission again and strategize how you're going to do that.
Just briefly, be kind to yourself. That's what I would tell myself, because I still struggle with that day to day. That's imposter syndrome is very real for me, and guilt is very real. And so, especially when I started the journey, the shame that I kind of felt, it was almost this, you have to do this to be worthy of working at this university. And I started out very unkind to myself. So be kind to yourself. And I think the other thing is, when I started, this is my organized self, I laid out this Excel spreadsheet of all of the credits that I would have to take to get this degree and how many I would be taking each semester, so I would know what the end date was. And the end date at that time was, okay, I can do this in 2.5 years. And if I could tell my younger self, 5 years ago, to put down the Excel spreadsheet and back away, I would do that, because in the second semester, that went out the window. The class that I wanted to take that second semester suddenly wasn't going to be offered because that professor had to go on leave. And so me scrambling, trying to figure out, my plan is all off. I got really frustrated and upset with myself. And it took trial and error to learn that I had to treat this by a semester to semester basis. So there were semesters where I only took one class, because that's all I had capacity to do that semester with what was going on in life and work. And there were some semesters where I took 3, because I feel like I can handle this. And then there was a semester in the summer that I did not understand that a summer 4-week course was going to be a full-time job, and I spent lots of those 4 weeks crying and really just overwhelmed. And so I would tell myself, be kind and take it semester by semester. As much as I want to see what the end goal is, that almost was harmful to me in a way, because as soon as that goal got moved back once, and then it got moved back again and again, it just felt like failure to me. I framed it in that way for myself, and that was not the case. I was forgetting to take into account all the wonderful things that were happening in my life at the time, meeting my partner, and so things are going to slow down maybe a little bit. I've in the last 4 years, I have 11 nieces and nephews all born, and so I wanted to go see them and visit them, and I didn't take that into account when I kept seeing that goal move back. And so take it semester by semester. Whether it's a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD, there are going to be times when that plan gets derailed, and it doesn't mean that you aren't smart enough to be keeping up with the rest of the cohort. It just means that you might have a lot going on, and that you're prioritizing in a way where you're not going to stress yourself out. So those are certainly the things I would tell myself starting out with that journey.
Thank you.
One more thing. Don't hold yourself to unrealistic standards. The first B I got, I cried. And my partner at the time was like, "Why are you crying? You got a B." And I was like, "It's not an A. I should be able to, I'm only taking one class this semester." And she was like, "You're working full time. You have a family. You have a life. it's a B. And then the next semester I got a C in a class. And I was just kind of like, you know what, like, it's fine. Because I still passed, I'm still gonna get the credits. And I was also just kind of like, it was a bad semester, and I left it to that. So like, yes, like sometimes you'll be like, I'm only taking a class or two, but you have a lot going on, you know, like when you're 18, 19, 20, your load of responsibility is pretty darn low, right? Like when you're like in your 20s and 30s, it's totally different, you know, and as you get older, like you have different levels of responsibility and that changes. So be okay with getting that B or C, and you know, just know that it doesn't make you any less of able to do what you're doing, because you're your own worst enemy. You're going to sabotage yourself if you're focused on perfection.
Thank you.
And get used to having some things in life fall to the side. So I am a person that prides myself on being very clean, and I love to cook at home. And those are things that it honestly took time to adjust to, the fact that the time that I would spend in the evenings by myself in my little one-bedroom condo, like now are going to school. And so I'm not going to be able to clean and to cook and to do all the things. And so understanding that some of that's going to fall aside, and you know, where I started being by myself and then having a partner, and when we moved in together, there's so much privilege in having somebody else, especially for me, not having children. It was wonderful to have him step up and do those things, but there was a time period where that was all falling to me, and I would, again, put that on myself and look around my messy home of like, you're not doing it all, when, again, I wasn't seeing the full picture. So be prepared for some things to get a little messy, both physically and literally and a little emotionally. So, yeah.
So we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure that you all have a chance to network with one another as well as talk to the panelists. But I think what we should realize, too, is that we work at a university, right? We have an employee study privilege. If we don't have a community here or supervisors here that will support our pursuing degrees and advanced degrees at a university, and we're having these discussions, imagine what it's like for professionals in the outside corporate world, right? How do they even broach this subject? We're surrounded by academia. We have these resources available to us, and if we so choose to take them. And I think it's always, even having a panel makes me think about, gosh, what kinds of discussions would be happening if we weren't working at a university, and what kind of conversations should not be happening because we are working at a university. And our supervisors should be, heck yeah, you go do that. But we do have a little bit of time. Does anybody have a burning question? Cori has a burning question.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your insights on the panel. And I could go into the gender dynamics of a lot of what you shared in terms of relationships and families and cleaning a household and all of that. But actually my question is coming more from the position of the institution itself. I think that when we think about students in higher education, we think about undergraduate students and the students that we serve as staff and faculty. But it was super inspiring. I'm really glad you asked the question, Way, of like who in the room is currently like pursuing a degree, taking courses, or considering doing that, and nearly every hand went up. So that struck me as an institution, maybe we're not paying enough attention to the fact that our employees are also our students in so many ways. And that makes me wonder, what are some of the barriers that maybe we're inadvertently creating, or pathways that we're not establishing for our staff and faculty as an institution of higher ed for continued learning? Meg, you mentioned the workarounds because we don't have the same sort of resources available to our non-traditional learners, and I'm not even saying non-traditional students because we have some resources targeting those. But for the people in the room who are professional staff, who are leaders on campus, and I'm saying like even this series, we've had people on the panels before who are vice presidents and executive directors finishing their degrees too. So this goes across all levels of the institution. So what maybe should we be thinking about in terms of how to better support the process of continued education for our employees and refocus some of our attention not just on our undergraduate or graduate students in the more traditional conceptions of what that might look like?
I'm going to go ahead and put a plug for something I'm pushing for. Service as work credit. I do so much work on campus on so many different issues, and I get lots of high fives, and I love the people I'm doing this work with, and I'm loving the work, and it's so fulfilling, and it's just something I do, right? And it would be great if I could get credit, or if Tony Frank wanted to give me an honorary bachelor so I can move on to my master's this next year. It's his last year, right? Whatever.
We'll make sure he gets the link.
Yes, please do. But really it's about, and we have this conversation a lot with Classified Personnel Council, which is supervisors not really supporting their employees to actually like go to like our 2-hour regular meeting like once a month and like to do like maybe 1 or 2 other things. And I'm thinking like the more involved you are on campus, or the more that you're doing to like grow professionally and personally, the happier you are in your work situation. So like even though I'm doing a job I don't want to do for the rest of my life, I'm very happy right now because I get to do so much and I get to take classes. But you know, it's like negotiating like, hey, like I have a front desk position. Is there someone else in the office who can sit at the desk for me 3 hours a week so I can go to an on-campus class? Have that conversation instead of just saying like, oh, I can't take that because that's during the middle of the day and I wouldn't be able to do that. Like have that conversation with your office and maybe like find someone and be like, hey, would you be willing to sit at my desk if you work a front desk position? Or maybe like volunteer yourself if you know someone who works a front desk position. I'm just gonna put that out there. Negotiate flex time. That doesn't work for everybody, but it's something I've done with my supervisors. Like some days I'm here until 7 p.m. because I was gone for like 3 hours during the day. So right, just kind of like negotiate those things and look for scholarship and funding opportunities. And if you are not taking classes, but you know someone who is, and you see something, forward it along. Like I'm oftentimes just being like, hey, here, take that, go. And honestly, I think just really we just need to like change this mindset of like, if you're not doing your day job, then you're not doing the work. Because like we're all doing a ton of work and we're all representing CSU when we leave campus. So just really hold that with yourself.
Okay, so the question is, how can we at CSU better support the learners and leaders in our community? One thing would be, I have to say about this is see the bigger picture. It's a human capital investment. And so, you know, if we are looking at it through a capitalist lens, if we are producing something, we're producing education, and by investing in us, in terms of education, it's a human capital investment. And also what's really cool about being in a program is that your workplace is a laboratory for the work that you do. And so I can't tell you how many times we had projects in our unit or goals that we had to meet, and I would say, look, these are these tools that I just learned, I can apply them. And so having the freedom to use my unit as a laboratory was very, very useful. And then just speaking again to the end of it takes a village to raise a progressive society. So that's the mission of a higher education institution. So continue to have that attitude and approach to learners on our campus.
They covered it. I have nothing to add.
I wonder too, Cori, if for our supervisors or unit leads or, you know, fellow colleagues, I feel like on a university campus, we shouldn't be surprised that people amongst us want to take classes or pursue degrees. And so I think sometimes what I'm hearing is we bump up against these conversations where people are worried about, ooh, if you do this, it's going to take away from what your responsibility is already, as opposed to, wow, good on you, we're going to help you do this because you're taking making full use of all the resources available to us on campus. And so I wonder if it's a mind shift, right? We should expect our people, not in a pressured way, but we shouldn't be surprised if people want to pursue. And I think that's a tough conversation for lots of people to have, because they have friends, supervisors say, why would you do that? Why wouldn't I?
Thank you. I think we can use the last 10 minutes for more questions. So are there other people here?
Other questions?
Yeah, you were right here.
Perfect. Hello. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I really appreciated the panel. Speaking for myself, I don't know if it's a barrier. One of the concerns I have about starting a program is that I'm a mother. I've got a 2-year-old, and I don't know that I'm done with my family. And so I'm curious to hear from those who have children in their lives, how you navigate that, and what are some of the barriers or, I don't know, wonderful things that I might not be thinking about as I think about starting a program someday.
Jimena, you want to start?
So while my relationship with my ex has changed, I still have a stepson, and we're navigating that, right? But I always saw it as an opportunity to role model. He's very smart, and I remember being his age, and I was very smart as well, and it was easy for me to just get lazy and to just be like, whatever, like I'll do this later. So instead, it was like kind of showing like, hey, like you will never stop learning. You're never going to be done. And, like I was doing like some prep for like the math placement exam, and he's really good at math, and he's really bad at explaining it, but it actually like was an opportunity for him to kind of be like, oh, well, this is really easy. And I was like, but with like talk to me like somebody who this isn't easy, and teaching life skills and communication skills. And I think that's important, right? And it's like, and you have to create boundaries for yourself. And I think we all keep being like boundaries, lots and lots of boundaries. But you can find a balance and, get your kids involved, do your homework together, or have your kid practice reading. I mean, like, young kids, maybe not so much, but they could be doing coloring while you're doing work, and create, like, kind of find a way to make it an interactive activity. And it's kind of passive, but it's actually kind of genius because it's like quality time while also doing what you need to do, so.
What I have to say is a little similar to Megan. I think I'm trying to think of, should I say this through a story with my son, about my son or not? But the idea is your family, you create the culture of your family. And if if you were working in a different industry, then you're kind of used to the parents or the guardians in your family. You cultivate a certain traditions in your family based on that. So the other day, my son and I were in Pueblo Viejo, the restaurant, celebrating Cinco de Mayo our way, which was to sit down at the table and read encyclopedic chapters about Cinco de Mayo. And then we looked to the right, and we saw a boy of similar age as my son, and we looked, and I said, hey, look, Adrian, you see, children, they are contributing to their family. He's like, yeah, Mom, but you don't work in a restaurant, and so, but if you did, then I would be doing that. And I said, yeah, but you are the son of a professor and a librarian, so what we do is read. So I think it's really great way to just, don't forget that you are not just, it's not just your mission, it's a family endeavor, and your family together can be creative. And if you let your family also show you how they can support rather than you telling them, but say, hey, how do you want to support me? What do you see? You'd find how incredibly insightful, creative, and loving they are, and it would take away a lot of the guilt that you may have as someone who's a head household, at the head household. It's not taking away, it's enriching and doing this together as a family. And hopefully I'll graduate with my son in high school.
I have 2 little boys, and I started my master's program online when I was on maternity leave with my second. And now in the fall, I'll be starting coursework for a PhD, but the boys are always like, wait, you're in school? What grade are you in? But I think it then reinforces, to your points, that learning doesn't have a beginning and an end. Like you're a continuous learner. And why do you still want to go to school, Mommy? Because there are things in this world that I'm interested in. I just want to know more about it. And it is a culture-setting piece, that it shows them that learning is not finite. And it doesn't, just because you're a grown-up now, you don't have to learn. Learning is not a have-to-do thing. It's a want-to-do thing. So I think that's how we've addressed it in our family.
I was just going to say, as a mid-30s woman who does not have children and does not want to have children, I'm navigating what that means in today's society. But for me, having 11 nieces and nephews, there's 10, but one's on the way, and still being the only person in my family to hold a degree, bachelor's or otherwise, I feel very much a call to that working towards something greater than myself feeling. And so providing a non-traditional example to my nieces and nephews of going to, you don't have to follow this traditional track of bachelor's, and then if you want an advanced, you go right away and you do all of that. So to me, it's just this, there's hardships with it, just for me navigating the time that it took to be in school. Like I said earlier, I had colleagues that had children, and I can't imagine the added responsibility on top of that, but I saw them do it and they did it well. But we all kind of talk about that common language of we're providing just this non-traditional approach that women and non-gender kind of binary individuals, we can make these own tracks for ourselves, and it's not going to be easy, but we're really laying ground for people to follow behind us. And so that's something that I've kind of carried with me even now, having recently graduated, of just that's how I talk about it, is I'm very realistic. It was hard and it wasn't easy, and there's a lot of pieces that took a lot of me, and I'm so glad I did it, and I'm so proud. I walked so slowly across that stage in December, and so many people were like, are you even gonna walk? Why are you gonna walk? You've already done that. And I was like, what do you mean, why am I gonna walk? This took me 4 years, and my parents came, which was they'd never been to Colorado before in the 8 years I've lived here, and so it was just this family pride thing, and I carry that with me when I speak about that. To me, it's just laying that groundwork for the next generation, whether it's your children or your friends' children or your, nieces or nephews. It's just a great way to kind of, just lay a new journey and for them to know is an option one day.
One more question. Okay, well, can you help me thank our panelists, and then we'll be around to chat with people.